Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our latest webinar. My name is David Bailey. I'm the head of comms over at the National Enabling Programme, and thanks for joining us again. We just get 51 attendees as we start. I'm sure that number will climb, and we've been getting over 100 every week recently, so it's really great to be able to join us. So the aim of these webinars, if it's one of your first, is to support colleagues across policing in adopting the 365 suite across the board, across policing, getting the best value out of what they're doing, sharing experience and sharing learning. And today we're lifting the curtain, a bit of a Wizard of Oz moment. We're going behind the curtain to see how we actually do what we're doing right now, which is live events. What we'll show you today is built into what you've already got in force. It's all accessible, it's all ready to use, it's part of the minimum viable product, it's part of the basic functionality of Microsoft Teams at the end of the day. And we've got Nick joining us today from Microsoft, our resident expert, who's going to take us through a few bits of it. But what we'll do is show you how we go around planning these events, how we run them, how we make sure we work the best. And we've been doing these for quite some time now, every week, and can give you an idea of what it covers. So this is including extra costs. We'll be very frank, you can buy lots of gizmos and plug it in and have very clever green screen effects and multiple cameras, but we're not really going to focus on that today. We're going to focus on the basics. We can find out more about doing those additional benefits moving on beyond it. We've also got Mike with us today, who's part of the leads the L&D function in the NEP. And you don't normally see Mike on the webinars, but let me assure you, he's in the background of every single one that we do and helps us to organise them, make them happen. And Mike will be telling us what he does with the data at the end of the webinar and how he uses the reporting functionality that we get out of them. Please put your questions into the chat. We will be answering them as we go through and come to them at the end. And of course, as always, if you've got something you want us to cover in a webinar or got something you want to share with us, please email us through nepinfo@pds.police.uk, through the website, etc. So let's get started. So we've used live events for these webinars, but we even did an international summit for 3 days on Teams, all working completely remotely, nobody in the same room at all. So it does show the capability that it has got. But first, Nick, can you take us through what's the difference between a Teams meeting and a live event?
Yeah, absolutely, David. So it's a really good question. It's a question that I get asked a lot. So they are quite different. So live events are all about presentation, large meetings like chief events, force-wide communications. There's limitations within Teams meetings, and there's some limitations within live events. When I say limitations, we're talking about numbers of users. So when we want a large event for a chief's event or a force-wide event, and we want more than 250 users, which is the limit at the moment with Microsoft Teams, then we need to do a live event. At the moment, those limits of numbers of people that can attend a live event is around 20,000 users. It's normally 10,000, but we have upped that limit because of COVID. So until June 2021, you can get 20,000 people joining that live event. Now, live events are very much view only, rather than Teams meetings are all about collaboration. So when we talk about a live event, they're view only, so you don't see the video and of the feed of those users. Those participants can use the Q&A like we have today in our live event here, and that's how we communicate with our user base, asking questions about the particular event that we're running. There's also some controls within live events. Those controls are very much around managing the content, moving from one presenter to another. So the webcam and the sharing of the content, again, as we do today in this live event. Well, in Teams, you have more video content, as in you can share video of all of your participants within that video, within that Teams meeting that you had. You can have chat throughout that meeting. You can run polls. You can share content. You can share whiteboard. So Teams meetings are all about collaborating with that group of users, a limit of 250 people in that meeting. Well, live events are those big, organized, producer-based, getting a message across to thousands of users.
I think one of the things for me as well that's in a live event that's not in a Teams meeting is the fact that you can give people the link, and it's basically a web browser link. They don't need to download Teams at all to access it. You can watch it as a webinar and use it as that. So it's got some flexibility for outside the organisation as well as inside. And in a few moments, I'll take you through some of the setups and how you can choose who your audience is and how you can put some limitations to have some control. So we've got a number of use cases for live events, and one of them that's on our website, and we're popping the link into the chat now, is how Cumbria during the COVID used live events for their chief officers roadshows. And we've put the link in there, or you can search for roadshow on the NEP website, transformation.police.uk, and read the full article and some of the benefits that they found when they were using that. And we know lots of forces have used it over the last 12 months for live events, and some forces are beginning to use it for the external events as well now. And certainly in cross policing, we're using them for things like the digital roadshow events, where we want to have lots of people involved, and you can have an element of engagement as well, but really a good way of moving it forward. Now, I'm going to move us on because there's quite a lot to cover in what we're going to do. Now, of course, the challenge is I can't really demonstrate how to do a Teams Live event on Teams Live. So I'm going to take you through some screen grabs and take you through the journey and explain it through. And if you've got any questions, do pop them into the chat and we'll pick them up. And some of this is mainly this is based on our experiences using it. We've read the manuals from Microsoft. We've been through the training with Nick. Nick will jump in at any point and add things, but we'll start off with the basics of it so you can understand where it is. And please note, some of this will change, and we'll hopefully get to that at the end later to show you what's coming down the line. But on screen there, you have a Teams calendar, and the first point to make is you need to schedule a live event from Teams calendar. And there's always an event owner, as you'd expect. So you go up to your new meeting, hit the drop down, and you go to live event. So that's your first starting point. Then you move swiftly on to a little dialog box that opens up and asks you to pop in the details. So you put your title in there. And the first thing that a bit of a gotcha, as Nick calls them, it automatically selects the next available time on the day that we're on. So it automatically, even if you're looking at a calendar 3 weeks in advance, you click live event, it automatically defaults to today at the next half-hour point. So again, really important that you're focusing on setting that date and time before you start anything else. It's got me a couple of times. I've set that up and made a mistake. The next bit is your presenters. So who is going to have a presenter? And there's a couple of roles within a live event. You've got a producer, and you know, we always recommend it. You have a 2 or 3 producers, and then you'll have your presenters who get a slightly different experience, and they can share their screen. And obviously the meeting owner is the person who can do any edits as we move it forward. So if I click onto the next slide, you can add them in, and you basically put in their email address in the invite presenters, and then they're automatically assigned the role of presenter. If you want to make them a producer, just hit the drop down and select that. It's very simple. You can obviously do it in different time zones. You can put a brief description of your event in there, and you can say this is a screenshot we've done. So really important to get your roles right. Guest people with no technical expertise, best make them a presenter, because if you're a producer, you can stop the event if you're not careful and don't know what you're doing. So that's what we'll cover. So keep your producers, and always have 2 producers as a minimum in case something goes wrong with somebody's connection. And then this is the event permissions. So once you've clicked next on that previous slide, you get presented with this screen. And this is the one that really gives you some control over how it can be operated. So I would never see myself using people in events. For a live event, you'd probably be in a Teams meeting for that. If you're using org wide, this is one which is perfect for those internal engagement events that you want to do, where you've got want to invite the whole force to a chief officer roadshow, but you don't want the local journalist who gets the link to be able to have access to it. Use the org-wide organisation where they have to sign in. And the ones that we use most of all is the public, and they just need to have the link to be able to join the live event. So select that at this point now before you move any further, and then you can scroll down the screen and you can see the options that are available there. So you've got several options here about recording available to the producers and presenters, recording available to the attendees, and captions, etc. So let me explain what we do with that on our experience. If you uncheck the recording available to attendees, It means that you've got some more control over who has access to the recording and some more control over what you want to do. If you left that checked, somebody with the link can come in after the event and download the recording and have access to it. That's not a problem, it's just a choice that you might want to make. Obviously, if you uncheck that box, only the meeting owner, the person who set the diary, would be able to access the recording. Just a point on recording, the moment you send the event live is when the recording starts. You don't have to press a separate button. And then you've got some of these options around accessibility and captions. And Lorraine will pop the captions on a little bit later on in the session to show this. But you can actually have captions in 6 different languages to make your event more accessible. And we always select as a national programme that we have Welsh captions available anyway, so that we comply with the Welsh Language Act. And then you want to make sure you get your attendee report, which is, we'll cover that a little bit later on, and turn on your Q&A. Normally by default, Q&A is switched off. If you want to have interactivity, just click that button and add that in, and away you go. And we'll cover what that looks like later. So you can see how we select the different languages that we want, the captions in there, and then we come to the support button. Now, by default, it puts the simple Microsoft support button, but you can put your own website details in there. So if people get stuck and they want help, you can send them to us as well. I've got grayed out this bit here about an external app or device. That's where you want to use a video encoder to do clever green screen effects, multiple cameras. If you're working in a studio, that's where you'd select that, and you're still able to do the live Teams event, but using those extra functionalities. So once you've scheduled your event, it has a slightly different icon in your Teams calendar and your Outlook calendar. That's what to look for what shows it's a live event from a normal meeting. So there you can see the little circles as it shows it on screen, what's happening with it. So we're getting close to doing that, and we've been in and we've set the event up, but we want to do a bit of work on it. So you've got your edit button here, and any producer can go in and edit the event at any time, but only the owner can actually add more presenters and juniors. So make sure your owner's available to you. And this is where you get your attendee link. A really important point is when you add a producer or a presenter, they are sent a diary invite with a dedicated link for them to join as a presenter or joiner. It does actually say when you send that, please don't forward this link. We remind people every time, please don't forward the link, because it can cause some problems, and we've had some experiences in the past where we've had technical issues when the presenters' links have been shared on and on and on. We're not sure why that happens, but it's just best practice not to do it. What you need is get the attendee link, and that is the link that we've shared with you today, so you can join the event and you can do anything you want with it. There's your join button when you want to come into this, and you can actually join the event anytime without making it go live. So you want to go in and test it's working. Or like we've done today, we came in 15 minutes early. That's where we click join, and we were having a chat to make sure everything's working before we started the actual event and the broadcast. So there's your basics in terms of setting up the event. And Nick asked me to share how we plan our events for this. And we try and make them interactive and accessible, but what we actually do is have a little bit of a framework, or we call it a script, but it's certainly not a script. It's a framework, so we know what we're going to be doing, who's going to appear on camera when, how we're going to manage the event, what sections we're going to cover, and we even put our links in that we might want to paste into chat. We all share the Word document, and we've all got it, and we've got one for today that's actually a little bit longer because we've got a lot more slides. And it's a really good way of helping all your presenters and producers knowing what's going to go on. And it's a really nice, simple tip to managing the event and moving it forward. So, Nick, have you got anything you'd like to add about the setup?
Yeah, absolutely, David. So I've been speaking to a lot of forces over the last couple of months around live events. Not too many questions, I think, because maybe a lot of forces still use the Teams meetings, and maybe just through transformation haven't quite got to live event. But a couple of the questions that I'm frequently asked is very much what you went through there, David, is the technology is there. It's quite straightforward to configure it. You know, David showed you on the PowerPoint presentations there, but sometimes it's all around the confidence of moving from one presenter to another. And, you know, what we do here and what David and the NEP have done, have created that little script, as we call it, is absolutely essential. You know, when I get this script every week, I just run through, I know where my name is, I know what the ask is, and I can see the handover points, and I'm ready for that handover point. So that's one of these sort of key messages here. Just put together a quick little notepad Notepad or something in OneNote, or as David here has got something in Word, just to make sure that your producers and your presenters know when they're going to talk. The other thing just to mention very quickly, sorry, David, is there will be a link hopefully at the end that David would share with you, is around the Live Event Assist program. So what Microsoft offer, it's free, is an ability to have about 4 hours of an expert's time around help with best practices, how to set up live events. When you're running the live event, they can be on the live event with you, just to give you some help, tips and trips around sort of producing and presenting live events. They can also come in after the event, again, just to give you some experience. You can share your experience with them, and also around what Mike's going to show you in a little bit later on, around the analysis of, you know, how successful your live event has been. So we'll share that link with you after this, after the live event today.
That's fantastic, Nick. So we've got to the day and we're going to go live with the event. So let's send the screen to live and see what you do. So you've seen this slide slightly before, and this is where your producer and your presenters are clicking the join and joining the event. So let's do that, and then you're presented with this screen. Now this is a demo screen. Obviously I'm not going to share the real screen because it could get very complicated to see screens within screens within screens within screens. But basically you get a simple layout slide, and it's a bit like producing a little television show is the best way of describing it. You've got your cues down the bottom, your pre-live and what you're broadcasting, but we're going to concentrate at the options at the top box first of all, and we'll take you through each of these, because once you're familiar with these it becomes a little bit simpler. So this is your layout that your producers will have. So onto the first slide, and you can see we've moved on here. There are two chats. A chat, and we call this one the presenters chat, or called the meeting chat by rights. This is only the people who are presenting and producing the event can be involved in this chat. It's a normal meetings chat. You can even have it as a little pop out, but basically you can talk to each other in presenters and the audience can't see what's going on. So that's how you coordinate things. I'm getting little messages that we're already running a little bit over time on this. The second one with the little question mark in the speech bubble is the live Q&A, and I know there's questions in the queue already where you're doing this, and you can see there's 3 categories in there. You've also got an open and close toggle here, so you can turn them off the Q&A or turn it on at any point. But again, remember to set it on as default first in the settings when you're doing it. So every time you guys are asking us a question, it appears in the new column here. And then Lorraine, who's helpfully driving the event, as we call it, we have a presenter and a driver, somebody making sure that we can drive. And you can do it on your own, but it's a lot easier with 2, is looking at the questions and moderating them and deciding whether to publish them across. What you can also do is answer them privately in the new column or answer them in the published. And of course, once they're finished with, we can dismiss them. And so the public, you guys are currently seeing around a few questions, and Amy has got the most recent question in there. I can see at the live event. You know, force wide option, we'll come to them in a second. That's in the published column, so you can moderate and manage and answer privately in the Q&A section there. The other couple of tabs that I'd show you is a quick health check on your network performance. So you click the little heartbeat symbol and you can test your speed, your round trip time, your resolution, check everything's working in terms of your technology. Occasionally use it just to make sure everything's working well. Just a hint and tip, make sure you're on a hardwired connection if you can be, or close to the Wi-Fi router. Disconnect a couple of Alexas around the house if you've got them going that's taking your bandwidth. Just think about those. And then the other really powerful one is the People tab, and this is just like on Teams meetings. You want to invite somebody to join the meeting, etc., and make things happen. You can invite them in here, or if they're invited and haven't joined yet, you can ask them to join, etc., through there. Now, this is one of the tips for when things do go wrong. We always say do a technical rehearsal with your speakers, particularly if they're outside the organisation and you're bringing somebody in. Test that it works. It's so invaluable. But also get a mobile number, because sometimes things go wrong with tech. We know that. So if you've got a mobile number for the person, you can actually dial them in and bring them in on the phone. And we've done that a number of times when things have gone wrong. We've made sure we've pre-advanced shared any slides that are going on and been able to do the old Chris Whitty thing. And next slide, please. And it gives us that backup plan to still be able to do them. But this is where you can do it. You can also click a button in here and share a link with them to invite them in. But this is where you invite your presenters and producers into the meeting. The last one that you can see there is the little cog. And again, this is your device setups, just like on Teams. You can see the microphones we're using, but you've also got a couple of options here. Now, one of them is live captions. We'd already set up so that you as users can turn on live captions if you want to, but hopefully Lorraine's going to just try and turn on the live captions now for this meeting, and we can enforce live captions into the room. So again, they pop up on the bottom of the screen. It might work, it might not. It's something best to set up beforehand. Away you go. You've also got an auditorium mode. So if you're doing a combined kind of hybrid event where you've got a big microphone coming in and you want to be able to optimize the sound because of getting the reactions like clapping, etc., you can turn that on there. That's a clever bit of AI that works in the background. Unlikely to use it, but it's nice to know it's there in the capability. So I'll take you through the top system tray. The next thing you look at is the bottom tray, which is the share tray or the presenters tray. And at the moment, I've got 3 presenters, myself, and a content tray on my live screen. And this is where you select what appears where. By default, when you come in, you're muted because you might be having an all-day event and bringing presenters in and you don't want them saying, "Hi, I've just arrived." Make sure you pre-brief people, but people come in muted by default. But you can see here, we can see each other as presenters in the slide. So this is also your slide option. So when you want to share a screen, you click the share button and this brings up the little system tray. And you, again, just like on Teams, you can open a screen, a window, etc. A tip I've always got is I've got 2 screens. You really do need 2 screens to present or produce an event. Lorraine manages with 1. I don't know quite how it does it. It is hard, but you can do it with 2. I've actually got 3 connected to this computer somehow. And you can select a screen and that lets you just drag in a browser or a PowerPoint, etc. Or you can just select a specific window. Absolute gotcha. If you're going to intend to send any video, make sure you select system audio. It's the same for normal Teams meeting, but just make sure if you're going to need to share video with audio, click that when you set the share up. You can't do it once you've already set the share up. You have to cancel the share and redo it. So now I've got 2 items in my presenter tray. I've got myself and the content. And this Q box is the one to concentrate on here. This is what you put that you want to go live. Now, the point I'll just quickly make is we've not gone live yet because it's a yellow box around the live event. That means we have not pressed the live button. We're not broadcasting yet. But what you can see here is I've clicked on the content button at the bottom, put it into the top screen. Because I've clicked this little tab here to have a mixed picture of a presenter and content, it's allowed me to add another button here. So I click there and then there, it allows me to put my camera next to the PowerPoint. But notice it's not what I'm going to broadcast at the moment. I'm still broadcasting the full screen share because you then decide, right, okay, I now want to send this to be my broadcast. You click the send live button and that's what goes into your broadcast. And that allows you to queue up your next shot. So you might be going to another presenter. So as when I've come to questions on Nick, go back to the scripts. Lorraine knows I'm going to be coming to Nick in a moment. She's selected, clicked on there where Nick's picture is, put it into there. And the moment I go and Nick, can you say this? Click the button to send it to live, and that's what appears. Just clicked too far ahead on here now. So that's great. So you get a bit familiar. You can switch between presenter and slide, or just presenter or just slide. You can do those are your buttons to do all that. That's where your vision mixing effectively comes in. You're ready to go live. It's 1 minute past the hour and you click the start button. That's when things get to your broadcast position. You click start and an extra dialog box pops up, and that's where it warns you that there's a 10 to 20 second delay from the broadcast starting, and until you press continue, you're not broadcasting out. So the moment you click continue, the box has turned red, and that now knows that we have got a live event and this is what you, the audience, are seeing. You can also see at the bottom of the system tray that the screen share and my camera has also gone red. And if I was not the person presenting, you can see there on the screen share, I've stopped sharing the screen, so the red box has dropped off, so I know that's not live now and my camera is live. So that's how you switch between events. So you're constantly switching between, okay, then I want Nick next, Mike next, select them first, and then send them to the send live. So you're broadcasting away you go, you're moving away. This is your red button to stop the event. One point of absolute note for Teams Live, once you start an event, once you end it, you can't restart it. It's a one-time only event. So please make sure you don't end it too quickly. So when you click end, you click the end button there, another dialog box pops up, click the end live event, and as soon as the red box has vanished, you've stopped broadcasting. So that's what you do with a live event. And again, we'll pick up some questions in a second. So I know we're running short of time, so I'm going to quickly jump and we'll come to questions at the end with Nick. So I'll jump on to Mike now. So Mike, when you come in at the end of the event, you come back into the diary entry and you download a couple of reports. And can you explain what you do, and I'll click the slides for you?
Thanks, Dave. So one of the challenges that we have with a live event is the fact that you can't see who's virtually in the room. You'll see the attendee numbers, but that's during the event, that's what you have and know. Once the event has taken place, you have the option to actually download the attendance, which will help you do a couple of things. So if we have a look at the next slide, please, Dave. All right.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. So what you have is an attendance report, and that will give you some basic information around who's joined it through their email address, when they joined it, and when they left. So not only can you see who's attended, but also how long they've been there for. And you can use this for a couple of ways. First of all, if we're finding that people are dropping in and out quite quickly, we need to think about, have they got the accessibility, and also looking internally, are we doing the content, are we delivering the content that people find that they want? But secondly, from I suppose an ongoing engagement perspective, you can actually see who is regularly turning up, and then perhaps more importantly, who isn't turning up. So if you're running a series of events and you feel there's pockets within your force that perhaps aren't attending, that should be attending, it'll help you direct some of your communications and your engagement pieces to those folks to say, look, really do appreciate that time's busy, but it would really benefit you to attend. So the reports are great ways for you to have a look to see, as I said, who's attending, perhaps who's not attending, how long they're attending for, and it will help you start driving your engagement far more succinctly and positively moving forward.
And you download those reports by going back into the event and selecting the download the attendee report or the Q&A report, and the Q&A actually logs all the questions down and who asked them. Now, I know there's a question there about anonymous, and that's where if you've joined from outside the organisation with just the link and you've chosen not to add any details, that's where anonymous picks up those points on that. The other thing that you can download at the end is obviously the recording of the event, and that's where you just click a button and it downloads the MP4 file, and also your transcripts are there. You can see last week's event, we've got an English transcript and a Welsh transcript if you want to make those available for accessibility, and in the advanced options there's still another copy of the recording, which is really valuable. What we tend to do with the recordings is do any edits, but because of the way we try and do the events now, we don't need to do any edits. Pop them onto YouTube, and then we can share them and manage them, but also into Stream, particularly useful for the internal documents. Set up a Stream channel, and then you can share that through Stream really effectively and be able to let people to watch that event again and again and again as we move forward. So that's the basics. Nick, have I missed any basics out? And then we'll hit some questions.
There we go. Love it when I'm on mute. No, I don't think you've done a fantastic job. I was following you through that, and there's nothing that I've discovered that you missed, David. You're obviously quite an expert.
I've been doing these for too many times. So let's have a look at the questions. And Lorraine, who's presents sometimes, and we take turns to drive and do this. What's your experience of being a driver of these events and making them work?
Well, it's quite interesting, David, because normally if I'm driving these, and because I'm working from home and my husband's working from home, I ask him not to work on the Wi-Fi whilst I'm doing these, but today it was unavoidable. So viewers might have noticed that the transitions between the cameras was quite slow. And I think that is something to be mindful of. They are quite slow anyway. So sometimes by the time you've moved to someone, the presenter has moved on to something else. So it's just a little tip really for the presenter to try and give the producer a little hint of who they're coming to next. If they're going, so like when you decided that you were going to ask Nick a question, I think you actually said on a couple of occasions, so Nick, I'm going to come to you in a moment and ask you, and that gave me time then to line Nick up. So just be mindful that when you're clicking those buttons to move from one camera to another, there can be a little bit of delay. But also I think the main tip that I would give to somebody who is presenting with guests, particularly if it's guests from outside of the organisation, which we have done quite regularly, is to not only have a technical rehearsal with them, but to go through the content so that you really clearly understand it, because it's often quite difficult if you're trying to read out questions and check the presenter chat as well. You can't always concentrate really deeply on what they're saying. So if you understand beforehand what they're going to be talking about, that's really helpful. And also to have a few questions of your own in your back pocket, so that, you know, if you're running a little bit ahead of time and you need to fill out a couple of minutes towards the end, you've got a few questions lined up of your own. You're not relying on other people asking them, although we've got loads of questions on the chat at the moment. So I don't know, David, whether you want to move on to those, because we're just about up with time. So let's rattle through those questions.
Yep, so let's go with the silly question. I don't know if you have, how do we know if we've got Teams enabled rather than just regular Teams? Go to your calendar and see if you can set it up, and then if not, contact your Force Project team and ask why. I would recommend that corporate comms, as a comms person, are involved in your team's live events, and perhaps the people who help to manage this, because otherwise you could be running these all the time and not get value. You have to think about, is it the right purpose for this? Question for Nick now. Can you upload documents to share them with attendees?
That's a really good question. It was one of the things I was thinking about when we were talking about this, about accessibility. So you may have an occasion where you want to share the content with your audience. You can't within the live event, but what you could do within that registration or that email that you send out inviting people to this live event, you could put a link to a SharePoint document with this, with the presentation, but you can't actually share it within the live event.
I think we've already answered the one around anonymous, the user completely anonymous to the presenters, or is it basically if they're using the Force tenant and the thing, they're going to be available because we're going to by default log you in by your team's ID. If you're sharing it with the public, it's up to them to decide whether to put their details in or not. There's a few options around that to move that forward. Lots of questions. So Richard's got a question here. Lots of issues using video in our standard Teams meetings events. With your experience, does live help with any of this?
That question for me.
That's a question for both of us, really. I think if you haven't got a strong connection, you're going to struggle with this. Yeah. It's the reality. It's rarely the Teams technology that's the issue. It's more likely your bandwidth where you are. Is that what you would say, Nick?
Yeah, the other thing as well, just to be mindful for a live event, you haven't got multiple video feeds. So with a Teams meeting, you may have 30, 40, 50 people, even 250, potentially having that video feed, which could cause you bandwidth issues. But more than likely, it's not necessarily Teams, it's the configuration. I mean, the best thing to do there is have a word with your Microsoft account team, whether you want to reach out to me and I can coordinate that for you. But there's things that we can help you with to have a look at sort of network assessments and so forth for your environment.
And just to get very techie just for a minute, the design we currently have means that all our traffic to the internet goes through what's called the VPN, the tunnel. The new design 3 that's just about to be released to Forces for adoption means that this sort of content doesn't need to go through the tunnel, which means it's actually better for Teams meetings. So you go straight to the Microsoft internet for it in a secure fashion. So a very techie question, a very techie response, but it is getting better. But it tends to be more a limitation on the network rather than the points across the board. So I know we've been answering questions in there. Can you run polls as the last question before we go into the wrap up, Nick?
No, unfortunately not. Polls are part of sort of collaboration, if you think about it, getting content from or responses from users. So that's within our Teams invited, so Teams meetings rather than Teams live event.
What we are doing that for our digital roadshows is actually using Slido and Microsoft Forms, combination of those sort of functions you can still do, but you can't get that poll thing. So, you can do it through those. So I hope that helps. Please reach out to us if you need any more help or support in doing these. Once you've perhaps watched this, you'll be able to feel a little bit confident, but the golden rule is test, rehearse and plan. That, like you would for any live event, test, rehearse and plan. It works really well. Next week's webinar is going to be on accessibility and a really important issue. It's following on from some work we're doing in the NEP with Forces and the accessibility champions. And we're going to give you a feel for the accessibility functionality that's within the Microsoft 365 stack and to give you some confidence in how we move that forward. There is a new Sway newsletter from us, which we'll be posting into the chat now. It's on the NEP website. Please take a look at what other colleagues in other forces are already doing with the NEP approach, and make sure those things. One last tip. Because we can see each other on the system tray at the bottom, we can actually put little cards up to say we've run out of time and things like that. So even when we've got the presenter chat, we actually use little cards and chats to talk to each other. Just again, a little way we can talk to each other and help each other out. Please join us next week. Hit the website. Remember, the recordings of all our webinars are on the NEP website, ready for you to watch and to use in force to help you move forward. So thanks for joining us. Hope that was a good session for you, and please keep in touch with us. Thanks, everyone.